The story begins in the chaotic, high-pressure world of modern-day Seoul, specifically in the frantic backstage area of Seoul Fashion Week 2024. The air is thick with the smell of hairspray and the sound of screaming directors. In the middle of this war zone, we meet our protagonist, 25-year-old Hana. Despite graduating at the top of her class from a prestigious design school, the harsh reality of the industry has reduced her to an invisible assistant. She is currently on her knees, frantically pinning the hem of a dress for a tyrannical designer who believes that fashion is meant to be suffered, not enjoyed. Hana is a genius of construction, obsessing over zippers, pockets, and breathable fabrics, but her ideas are constantly mocked and rejected. As her boss screams at her for a minor sewing error, humiliating her in front of the models, Hana feels the crushing weight of her failed dreams. She is talented, but in this cutthroat modern world, she is nobody. Late that night, exhausted and unpaid, Hana seeks refuge from a torrential thunderstorm inside the National Museum of Korea, where she has been sent to return a rental costume. The museum is empty and shadowed, the only light coming from the lightning flashing violently outside. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, Hana wanders into the Joseon Dynasty exhibit. She stops in front of the centerpiece, the Ganryangpo, the majestic scarlet dragon robe worn by the kings of old. While a normal visitor would admire the history, Hana analyzes the stitching with a critical eye. She mutters to herself, criticizing the garment's terrible ergonomics. She notes the high, suffocating collar, the restrictive layering that prevents arm movement, and the lack of ventilation. In her mind, she is already redesigning it, imagining how a simple hidden zipper or a modern cut could change the wearer's entire demeanor. She whispers that if she were the tailor, she would have made the king comfortable. Suddenly, the storm intensifies. A massive bolt of lightning strikes the museum's lightning rod directly above the hall. The power grid explodes, plunging the room into pitch darkness. Startled, Hana stumbles backward, tripping over a velvet rope. As she falls, she crashes into the glass display case housing the dragon robe. At the exact moment the glass shatters and cuts her skin, the atmospheric electricity arcs through the metal frame. Hana doesn't just hit the floor, she feels a violent, sickening pull in her gut, as if the universe is turning inside out. The sound of thunder merges with the sound of tearing fabric, and Hana's consciousness is ripped away from the 21st century, spiraling into the unknown. When consciousness returns to Hana, the sharp, metallic scent of the museum's ozone is gone, replaced violently by the pungent odors of harsh lye soap, damp wood smoke, and unwashed bodies. She is not in a hospital bed. She is lying on the wet, splintered wooden floor of a bustling, open-air laundry courtyard. Before she can process the impossible shift in reality, a stern, middle-aged matron grips her arm and hauls her upright, barking at her for sleeping on the job. Hana is disoriented, her vision blurring in the harsh sunlight. She looks down to find her modern hoodie and jeans vanished, replaced by a rough, faded pink joggery and a heavy, shapeless linen skirt. Her smartphone, her lifeline to the modern world, is gone. She is shoved roughly into a line of servants carrying piles of freshly pressed silk robes toward the main palace complex. Hana attempts to rationalize the situation, a coma dream, a hallucination, or an elaborate prank, but the gritty texture of the gravel digging into her straw shoes feels terrifyingly real. Following the line of eunuchs, she is led deep into the palace, arriving at the king's private changing chambers. The atmosphere inside is suffocating, silence hangs heavy in the air, thick with the scent of sandalwood and absolute terror. In the center of the dim room stands King Lee-Hon. He is a striking, intimidating figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that seems carved from cold marble. However, the energy radiating from him is volatile. Servants tremble visibly as they attempt to dress him in the heavy, multi-layered royal attire. The king is miserable. He acts like a caged animal, growling that the collar is choking him and that the arm movements are too restrictive. In a fit of claustrophobic rage, he rips a seam of the expensive silk, causing the servants to drop to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the floor in a desperate plea for mercy. Hana, watching from the shadows of a paper screen, realizes that the king's anger isn't born of arrogance, but of physical suffering. He is a man trapped in his own role, bound by silk chains that do not fit his physiology. Her designer instincts override her common sense and fear. She steps out of the line, interrupting the tense silence with a clear, critical voice. Without waiting for permission, she critiques the garment's construction, pointing out that the shoulder seam is cut too high for a man with his muscular build, causing the fabric to pull at the neck whenever he moves. The room freezes. The audacity of a lowly laundry maid speaking to the monarch is unheard of. Lady Choi, the severe head of the Royal Sewing Bureau, looks ready to faint from shock. The king slowly turns, his obsidian eyes locking onto this insignificant girl who dares to speak when others can barely breathe. Instead of ordering her immediate execution, he is intrigued by her lack of fear. He approaches her, towering over her small frame, the heat of his presence overwhelming. He demands to know if a laundry girl believes she possesses more skill than the royal artisans who have served the throne for generations. Lady Choi intervenes, screeching that the girl, whom she calls Dami, is simple-minded and should be flogged for her insolence. The king ignores the old woman. He walks to the wall, unsheathes a ceremonial sword, and points the cold steel tip directly at Hana's throat. The threat is real. He offers her a deadly ultimatum. She has exactly 24 hours to prove her arrogance justified. She must create a robe that feels like wearing clouds, a garment that offers protection without restriction. If she succeeds, she lives. If the robe pinches, pulls, or restricts him even slightly, he will cut her down himself. As the guards drag Hana away to the sewing room, locking the heavy doors behind her, the gravity of her situation crashes down. She is trapped in the past, her life hangs by a thread, and her only weapon is a small, emergency sewing kit from 2024 that she miraculously still has hidden in her pocket. The clock has started ticking. Hana finds herself imprisoned in the royal sewing room, a space that smells of stale starch and overwhelming anxiety. As the heavy wooden bolt slides into place outside, the reality of her predicament settles in. The sun is beginning to set, casting long, prison bar shadows across the floor. She is surrounded by the finest materials in the kingdom, rolls of shimmering navy silk and spools of gold thread, yet the tools available to her are primitive. The needles are made of bone, thick and blunt, and the iron scissors are dull enough to bruise a tomato rather than cut fabric. With a deadline of dawn and a death sentence hanging over her head, these tools are a guarantee of failure. Desperation drives Hana to search her person, praying that the transtemporal shift hasn't stripped her of everything. Her hands fumble under the layers of the rough linen servant's skirt until she feels a familiar, heavy weight tied securely around her waist. It is her backstage survival pouch, a fanny pack she had been wearing during the fashion show to fix wardrobe malfunctions on the fly. To the maids who dressed her earlier, it must have looked like strange undergarments, so they left it alone. With trembling hands, she unzips the pouch. In the dim lantern light, the sound of the modern zipper is alien and harsh. Inside, she finds her arsenal from 2024. First, her fingers brush against the cold, smooth steel of her Japanese high-carbon sewing shears. She pulls them out, the blades gleaming lethally, light years ahead of the clumsy iron tools on the table. Next, she finds a yellow measuring tape, a tangle of safety pins, and a piece of Tailor's chalk. But the true treasures are at the bottom, a 12-inch invisible black zipper and a roll of industrial-strength velcro. In this era, these are not just sewing notions, they are inexplicable artifacts of sorcery. Hana wastes no time. She grabs a bolt of dark navy silk, the king's signature color, and lays it out on the cutting table. A young eunuch, Park, who has been assigned to watch her from the corner, gasps in horror as Hana bypasses the traditional folding methods. She takes her modern shears and slices through the priceless fabric. The sound, a crisp, precise shk, is terrifyingly loud in the quiet room. Park trembles, convinced that this madwoman is destroying the royal treasury and that they will both be skinned alive for it, but Hana ignores him. She drags the terrified boy to the center of the room, forcing him to act as her mannequin since he is roughly the king's size. For the next 10 hours, Hana works like a woman possessed, deconstructing centuries of tradition with modern engineering. She identifies the geoggery, jacket, as the main culprit of the king's discomfort. The traditional ribbon ties choke the chest and loosen over time. She constructs a hidden placket inside the jacket's lining and sews in strips of the industrial velcro. It allows the garment to snap shut instantly, creating a perfectly smooth silhouette that will never loosen, eliminating the need for the restrictive chest knot entirely. Next, she tackles the baji, pants. Traditional trousers are voluminous and held up by a sash that digs into the stomach, causing indigestion and discomfort. Hana radically alters the pattern. She tailors the waist to fit the king's measurements precisely and installs the invisible zipper along the side seam. It is a risky move. If discovered, the metal teeth of the zipper could be seen as a weapon, but it is the only way to ensure the pants stay up without binding the king's midsection. Finally, she addresses the sleeves, cutting them narrower but adding a hidden diamond-shaped gusset under the armpits, a technique used in modern sportswear to allow for 360-degree rotation of the arm without lifting the hem of the jacket. By the time the rooster crows, announcing the dawn of her execution day, the room is littered with scraps of silk and thread. Hana is slumped against the wall, her fingers bleeding from needle pricks, but the outfit is finished. On the mannequin, it looks like a traditional, impeccable set of royal robes. But underneath the surface, it is a piece of 21st-century tactical gear masquerading as formal wear. The heavy doors slam open, breaking the silence. Lady Choi enters, flanked by two stone-faced royal guards. She sweeps her gaze over the room, ignoring the exhausted girl and focusing on the strange scraps of fabric on the floor. She sneers, seeing only a breach of protocol and a wasted night. She does not even inspect the garment closely, confident that a laundry maid could never replicate the work of masters. With a cruel, satisfied smile, she orders the guards to seize the garment and drag the girl to the king's chambers. The executioner is waiting, and Lady Choi is eager to see the show. The atmosphere inside the king's private chambers is heavy enough to crush bone. The morning court has gathered early, ministers, generals, and a smug Lady Choi, all ostensibly there to attend the king, but in reality, they are spectators waiting to see the insolent laundry maid lose her head. In the center of the room, King Lee-Hon stands stripped to his waist, his broad back scarred from sword training, waiting for his morning dress. His expression is darker than a brewing storm. He expects failure. In fact, the royal executioner is already standing by the outer doors, sharpening his blade. Hana steps forward, her legs trembling beneath her heavy skirt, clutching the navy robes she spent the night engineering. Lady Choi immediately moves to intercept, ordering her own servants to dress the king so she can point out every flaw in the sewing. Hana, driven by a surge of protective adrenaline over her creation, refuses. She speaks up, her voice shaking but loud, insisting that the garment requires special handling that only she understands. The king, intrigued by her continued defiance in the face of death, waves Lady Choi away and orders Hana to proceed. The room holds its breath as Hana approaches the monarch. Up close, the heat radiating from his skin is intense, and the sheer size of him makes her feel insignificant. She tries to ignore the expanse of his muscular chest as she guides his arms into the new jacket. Typically, this process involves a servant struggling to tie a complex, tight knot at the sternum that restricts the ribcage. The king winces, expecting the usual pressure. Instead, Hana presses the front of the jacket together. Rip-click. The sharp, tearing sound of the velcro fastening echoes through the silent chamber like a thunderclap. The ministers gasp, and the king looks down at his chest in genuine shock, wondering if she just tore the silk. But when he looks closer, he sees the fabric is perfectly smooth, fused together by an invisible force. Before he can question the sorcery, Hana moves to the trousers. She pulls them up and seals the waist with the side zipper. Zip. The high-pitched mechanical hum is a sound no one in the Joseon Dynasty has ever heard. The pants fit his waist perfectly, hugging him without the need for a bulky sash that cuts into his stomach. Hana steps back and issues a bold command. She tells the king to move. She tells him to swing his imaginary sword. The court is horrified by her rudeness, but the king obeys. He lifts his arm high. He twists his torso. He lunges. For the first time in his reign, the clothes do not fight back. The fabric moves with him. The hidden gussets under the arms expand, allowing full range of motion. The velcro holds firm, refusing to pop open. The zipper stays invisible and flat. The king freezes in a lunge position, breathing deeply. His chest expands fully, filling his lungs with air without battling against layers of tight silk knots. The look of perpetual irritation that has defined his face for years melts away, replaced by stunned realization. He whispers that it feels like he is wearing nothing at all, yet he is fully armored. Turning to the shocked assembly, the king's voice booms with a new, vibrant energy. He declares that this is not merely a garment, but a weapon. He announces that from this day forth, Dami is no longer a laundry maid, but the head of the king's personal wardrobe. He walks toward Hana, invading her personal space until she is enveloped in his scent of sandalwood and power. Leaning down, he drops his voice to a husky whisper meant only for her ears, telling her that she has saved his sanity, and warning her that she is never to leave his side again. Hana gulps, realizing the complexity of her new reality. She has survived the executioner, but looking into the intense, possessive fire in the king's eyes, she realizes she has traded a quick death for a slow, dangerous entanglement in royal intrigue and undeniable attraction. And just as Hana is realizing she's trapped in a web of ancient politics and a blooming, dangerous romance, it's a perfect time to remind you, if you're enjoying this story and want to see how a modern girl turns the Joseon court upside down with her inventions, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. We bring you the best romantic recaps every week, so don't miss out on what happens next. The moment is shattered by Lady Choi. Her face purple with rage, she steps forward, her voice shrill with panic. She accuses Hana of witchcraft, pointing at the strange, singing metal of the zipper and the sticky fabric of the velcro as proof of dark magic. The court mutters in agreement. Technology this advanced is indistinguishable from a curse to them. The king turns slowly to Lady Choi, his face hardening back into a mask of ice. He defends Hana instantly, stating coldly that if comfort and efficiency are witchcraft, then the court should learn some spells, because he is never wearing their suffocating knots again. Hana lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She has won the battle, but as she catches the venomous, hate-filled glare of Lady Choi, she knows the war has just begun. The royal tailor has a powerful new enemy, and this one knows how to play dirty in a palace where accidents happen all the time. 2 weeks into her tenure as the king's personal tailor, Hana discovers that life in the palace is less like a fairy tale and more like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. The King Lee-Hon refuses to wear anything unless Dami has constructed it, which has only fueled the vicious rumors circulating the court. Whispers echo in the corridors that the laundry girl is a witch who has sewn a love spell into the king's trousers, binding his will to hers. The pressure reaches a breaking point when the royal herald announces the arrival of the diplomatic envoys from the Ming Dynasty, a delegation known for their arrogance and their tendency to bully the smaller kingdom of Joseon. Late one night, in the privacy of the sewing chamber, the king reveals his anxiety to Hana. He confesses that the envoys are coming to mock him, to treat Joseon as a vassal state. He needs a garment that projects absolute power, something that makes him look not just like a king, but like a predator, a dragon ready to devour the sun. Hana studies his silhouette and realizes that while he is muscular, the traditional sloping shoulders of the Ganryangpo make him look passive. She decides to introduce the 1980s power suit concept to the 15th century. She promises him a robe that will change his very silhouette. For 3 days, Hana works in secret. Since she cannot order modern foam, she improvises, scavenging dense cotton wadding from discarded winter quilts to create structured, architectural shoulder pads. She inserts them into the crimson silk, broadening the king's frame by inches, giving him an intimidating, V-shaped torso that dominates the room. The night before the banquet, the robe is finished. It is magnificent, sharp, imposing, and flawless. Exhausted but triumphant, Hana steps out to the royal kitchens to steal a rice cake, leaving the garment on the mannequin. When she returns 10 minutes later, her scream echoes through the palace complex. The robe has been destroyed. The priceless red silk has been slashed into ribbons with a knife. Worse, a pot of thick black ink has been appended over the gold embroidery, staining the chest and hem in ugly, spreading blotches. Lady Choi stands in the doorway, feigning shock with a performance worthy of an award. She laments that rats seem to have gotten to the silk, and with a cruel sneer, suggests that the king will have to wear his old, weak robes, and likely execute the tailor who failed him. She tells Hana to go back to the laundry where she belongs and leaves the girl kneeling amidst the ruin. Hana touches the slashed, ink-stained fabric. The banquet is at dawn. There is no more red silk in the treasury. She has nothing. Despair threatens to drown her, but then a spark of modern defiance ignites in her chest. She remembers the avant-garde runways of Alexander McQueen and Rei Kawakubo, where destruction was treated as a form of creation. She realizes she doesn't need to hide the damage, she needs to weaponize it. She commands the terrified eunuch Park to fetch her buckets of water and highly caustic lye, the harsh bleach used for cleaning stone floors. Eunuch Park warns her that lye burns the skin, but Hana doesn't care. She spends the rest of the night doing the unthinkable. She dips the hem of the ruined robe into the lye mixture, stripping the red dye and blending it with the spilled ink. She creates a deliberate ombre effect, where the robe fades from a deep, blood red at the shoulders down to a terrifying, charred black at the hem, looking as if the king has walked through fire. Instead of hiding the knife slashes, she uses thick gold thread to stitch them back together roughly, highlighting the tears rather than concealing them. She employs the philosophy of kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, to turn the sabotage into a symbol of resilience. When the sun rises, the robe does not look neat or polite. It looks dangerous. It looks like the armor of a king who has been to hell and survived. Hana wraps her blistered fingers, picks up the garment, and marches toward the great hall to face her fate. The grand hall falls into a deathly silence as King Lee-Hon makes his entrance. The Ming envoys, usually loud and confident in their diplomatic immunity, stop their drinking mid-sip. They stare, visibly unsettled. The king does not look like the submissive monarch of a vassal state. Thanks to Hana's architectural shoulder pads, his silhouette cuts through the room like a broadsword. The robe itself is terrifying. The transition from blood-red shoulders to a charred, abyss-black hem makes him appear as though he is rising from a battlefield of ash. The rough gold stitching over the knife slashes catches the candlelight, looking less like embroidery and more like healed battle scars. He does not look polite, he looks like a god of war. Hana watches from the shadows behind a pillar, holding her breath until her lungs burn. The king sits on his throne, his gaze scanning the room until he finds her. He gives the slightest, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement that she has turned his ruin into armor. The banquet commences, but the air is thick with tension. Dancers swirl and wine flows, but the king remains alert, his posture relaxed only because his clothes finally allow it. Then, the trap springs. A waiter approaches the royal table to pour wine. His hand is steady, but his eyes are too focused. As the king raises his cup for a toast, the waiter drops the heavy pitcher. Before the clay shatters on the floor, a dagger slides out of his sleeve. Screaming a curse against the tyrant, the assassin lunges across the low table, aiming for the king's heart. In any other timeline, wearing traditional royal robes, King Lee-Hon would be dead. The massive, billowing sleeves would have tangled his arms, and the tight knots at his chest would have restricted his reach. But tonight, he is wearing Hana's design. As the assassin lunges, the king reacts with supernatural speed. He throws his right arm back to draw his sword. The hidden underarm gusset expands instantly, allowing his arm to snap back without the fabric pulling or resisting. Simultaneously, his hand reaches for his waist. The zippered side slit Hana installed allows his hand to pass directly through the robe to his belt, bypassing layers of bunched fabric. Swing. In one fluid motion, biomechanically impossible in traditional clothing, the king draws his blade and deflects the dagger inches from his chest. Sparks fly from the metal collision. With his other hand, unrestricted by tight seams, he delivers a crushing punch to the assassin's chest, sending the man crashing into the feast table. The royal guards swarm the attacker instantly, but the fight is already over. The king stands tall, chest heaving, sword in hand. He isn't even winded. His clothes have moved with him like a second skin, a seamless extension of his body. He looks down at the trembling Ming envoys and coolly remarks that the party is over. Later that night, the storm that brought Hana to the past returns with a vengeance. Thunder shakes the palace foundations. The king storms into the sewing chamber, dismissing the guards. He doesn't speak. He crosses the room in 2 strides and pulls Hana into a crushing embrace, burying his face in her neck, shaking slightly from the adrenaline crash. He whispers that she saved him twice, first his dignity with the robe, and now his life with the cut. He pulls back, gripping her shoulders, and demands to know who she truly is, realizing that no simple laundry maid could engineer a miracle. Hana looks at him, her heart breaking. She realizes she is in love with this grumpy, dangerous man who was once a tyrant of ice. But outside, the wind is howling, and the air in the room begins to crackle with static electricity. The portal is opening. "I'm not Dami," she confesses through tears. "And I don't think I can stay." The king panics. He offers her anything: gold, titles, the position of queen. He begs her not to look at the sky with that longing expression. But the pull in Hana's gut is undeniable. The timeline is correcting itself. And guys, this is the moment that tears every K-drama fan apart. Hana has to choose between her dream job and the love of her life in the past, or her real family and modern conveniences, like indoor plumbing, in the future. If you want to know if she chooses the king or the iPhone, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. We are heading into the finale, and trust me, you won't see this ending coming. Hana backs away toward the open courtyard doors, the wind whipping her hair violently. She cries out that her life is not here, that she misses her mother, that she belongs to a different time. The king chases after her, reaching out, his fingertips brushing hers. A bolt of lightning strikes the ancient tree in the courtyard, turning the world blindingly white. The air screams with electricity. Hana feels herself being ripped backward. The king screams her name, running into the heart of the storm to catch her. But when the light fades and the thunder rolls away, the courtyard is empty. Hana is gone. Lying on the wet ground, left behind like a Cinderella slipper, is the custom-made navy jacket with the zipper, the only proof that she ever existed. Seoul, 2024. Hana gasps for air, waking up on the cold, hard marble floor of the National Museum. The alarm is blaring, drowning out the thunder outside. Security guards rush into the exhibit hall, shining blinding flashlights in her face. There is no king, no Lady Choi, and she is wearing her damp gray hoodie, not a hanbok. Confused and heartbroken, she looks at the display case. The glass is shattered, but the ancient red ganryangpo is untouched inside. She touches her face. There are tears on her cheeks, but no one believes her story. The next morning, the consequences of her accident are swift. Her boss fires her for sleeping on the job and destroying museum property. Hana is unemployed, broke, and widely considered crazy. But something has changed in her. She doesn't feel like the invisible assistant anymore. She remembers the way the king looked at her, with respect and awe. She remembers that her designs didn't just look good, they saved a life. She walks out of that studio with her head held high and never looks back. She starts her own brand from a tiny basement apartment. She calls it the Royal Fit. Her concept is radical but simple. She combines the majestic, flowing aesthetics of the Joseon Dynasty with aggressive modern functionality. She puts hidden zippers on traditional jackets. She uses velcro in silk sashes. She adds gussets to suits for movement. It becomes a global sensation. 3 years later, Hana is debuting her fall/winter collection at Seoul Fashion Week, the same event where she was once a nobody. The runway show is a triumph. Models strut in armored streetwear that looks like it belongs to a modern warrior king. As Hana walks out for her final bow, the applause is deafening, but her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. She scans the VIP front row, subconsciously looking for a face she knows she will never see again. She retreats backstage, the adrenaline fading into a familiar ache of loneliness. She is packing up her kit when a deep voice speaks from the shadows. "Excuse me." Hana freezes. The timbre of the voice vibrates through her bones. It is deeper than memory, authoritative yet soft. A man steps into the light. He is wearing a sharp, modern navy suit, impeccably tailored with broad, structured shoulders. He is handsome, with sharp, angular features and eyes like polished obsidian. He looks exactly like King Lee-Hon, minus the long hair and the weight of a kingdom on his back. I am the new CEO of the textile group sponsoring this event, the man says, looking at her with an intensity that makes her knees weak. He touches the lapel of his jacket. I tried on one of your prototypes backstage. It has a zipper on the side. It is the first time in my life I haven't felt choked by a suit. Hana stares at him, her breath catching in her throat. The specific complaint, the feeling of being choked, is the link. Tears well up in her eyes. It's designed for breathing, she manages to whisper. The man smiles, a rare, genuine smile that reaches his eyes, transforming his cold face into something warm. He extends his hand. I'm Lee-Hon, and for some reason, I feel like I've been waiting for these clothes, and for you, my entire life. Hana looks at his outstretched hand. She reaches out. The moment their skin touches, a spark of static electricity shocks them both, loud and sharp. It's not a storm this time, but a promise. The man doesn't pull away, he grips her hand tighter, as if he remembers everything. I'm Hana, she says, holding on for dear life. And I have so many ideas to show you. The screen fades to black as they stand there, two souls stitched together across time, finally finding the perfect fit. And that is the incredible story of the Royal Tailor. From a failing designer to a time-traveling genius who reinvented history with a zipper and found true love in the process. It's a beautiful reminder that sometimes, to find your future, you have to go back and fix the past. So, what do you think? Was the CEO really the reincarnation of the king remembering his past life, or did fate just bring them together again? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you loved this mix of fashion, history, and romance, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next recap.